This is the historic village of Nazareth. 2,000 years ago, for a carpenter named Joseph and a young woman named Mary, life here was defined by the rhythms of a small rural community, daily chores, local festivals, and the expectations of their neighbors. That ordinary life was disrupted the moment Mary discovered she was pregnant. In first-century Judea, a child conceived outside of marriage brought a heavy weight of social stigma, placing Mary in a position of immediate vulnerability. Joseph initially struggled with doubt. He faced a choice between his care for Mary and the public shame this pregnancy would bring upon them both, navigating the fear that they would be cast out by their own community. Before they ever faced the physical road to Bethlehem, the couple had to navigate a social gauntlet. They were forced to endure suspicion and the threat of rejection within the very town where they had dreamed of a simple future. This carving depicts the Roman military authority that occupied the region. For the people of Judea, the presence of foreign soldiers was a constant militaristic reminder that they were a conquered people under the thumb of an empire. Day-to-day life involved navigating the hostility of these occupying forces. Systematic taxation and the frequent harassment of locals by Roman soldiers created a persistent state of external pressure and fear. The power behind this occupation sat in Rome. A decree from Emperor Augustus mandated a region-wide census, requiring every citizen to return to their ancestral town to be registered and taxed, regardless of their personal circumstances. This decree stripped the couple of their agency. It forced an expecting mother and a carpenter out of their home and onto a hostile road, prioritizing imperial logistics over their safety. They traveled with very little. Their preparations consisted of packing a few essentials, like date cakes for the road and fresh linens, while relying on a single donkey to help carry their meager belongings. This map shows the route they were forced to take. It was a 90-mile trek from Nazareth to Bethlehem, a distance that tested the limits of human endurance as the path climbed through jagged, mountainous terrain. For a woman in the final stages of pregnancy, the physical agony of this journey was constant. Every mile over the rocky, uneven ground meant enduring exhaustion and pain as they hurried to reach their destination before the child was born. Looking at these deep desert canyons, the hazards of the Judean landscape become clear. A single misstep on a narrow ridge could result in disaster. There was also the constant threat of isolation. Traveling through these desolate stretches meant living in fear of wild animals and the very real possibility of being targeted by bandits. Surviving this environment required a total reliance on one another. The shared trauma of the trek and the constant physical danger forged a bond between Mary and Joseph that would be necessary for the final obstacle ahead. Upon arriving in Bethlehem, they found a city that was entirely overwhelmed. The mandated census had drawn crowds from across the region, flooding the streets and the local infrastructure. Because the population had swelled so rapidly, finding shelter was a logistical impossibility. Every available room and corner in the town was already occupied by travelers. While the town was genuinely full, the couple encountered a social friction that sharpened their struggle. They were dismissed for their ragged appearance, with one innkeeper telling them they didn't look like they could afford a room, and another telling them to clean themselves up. This rejection created a terrifying urgency. Mary was actively going into labor, yet despite the emergency, the local community had entirely closed its doors to them. Having survived the reach of the empire and the brutality of the desert, their final obstacle was the indifference of their own people. In a final act of survival, they were forced into a crude, dark stable. They sheltered among livestock, using lanterns to cut through the dark and dust of a place meant for animals rather than people. It was here that Mary gave birth. Isolated and far from any medical aid or household comfort, the child was born in conditions that were radically stripped down and raw. This dirt floor delivery stands in sharp contrast to the titles of king and savior that would later be associated with the child. The one proclaimed to bring hope entered the world in the most humiliating of circumstances. To reach this moment, the couple had to defeat a sequence of compounding barriers: the threat of social exile, the weight of imperial law, a deadly landscape, and finally, societal apathy. The symbol of hope did not bypass human suffering to arrive in a palace. It entered the world because a young couple possessed the resilience to endure the physical and social gauntlet required to reach Bethlehem.